Chapter 6. Sarah woke to concrete against her cheek. Light bled in from somewhere above her. Was she in a warehouse, or was she in a basement? Her skull throbbed and protested with each heartbeat. She tried to move, but groaned. Her limbs responded reluctantly and painfully. Something was very wrong with her side. The effort produced nothing but pain. Her head was full of sharp, scattered pieces of memory. Boots, shouting, Marie, alive when she shouldn't be, then a needle, then blackness. Pain bloomed when she tried to sit up. It felt deep and wrong. It felt seriously fundamental, centered under her ribs. She must be badly hurt. Her hand went to it, pressing through the loose fabric of her top to feel ridges of material. She pulled the hem up and forced her neck to bend so she could see. Bandages. A thick dressing, sloppily applied and stained through in patches of red and brown. What the hell had happened? She didn't remember having been wounded during the chaos, but then she'd lapsed into unconsciousness, so she must have missed that bit. At least someone had tried to help her by the looks of it. She swallowed hard, but her mouth was dry, and there was a lump in her throat that felt immovable. Where was she? And how badly was she hurt? Had she lost a lot of blood? What about infection? She must not let panic overcome her. Sarah lay still, practicing her just calm down breathing. Breathe in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 5. She was going to be okay. She was tough. Yes, she was. She couldn't remember where she'd been taken, and she couldn't remember what had happened to her. But at least she knew she was Sarah. Bracing her hand against the ground, she tried to sit up. The pain under her ribs flared white-hot. Sarah gritted her teeth and forced herself into a seated position. Her careful breathing deteriorated to shallow bursts. She lifted her top again to stare at the bandaging. It covered a large expanse of her torso. It was discolored. Her stomach turned as a memory came back to her of Marie, John's supposedly dead wife, saying, "Asset located," as she pointed to John, and then saying, "And his donor. That one," as she pointed to Sarah. Then there had been 2 soldiers flanking her, asking, "Is this the correct one?" And Marie affirming that yes, Sarah was the correct donor. Donor. John was the asset. He needed a kidney, and they'd taken one of hers for him because he was her triplet brother. She let the thought settle. It was hard to accept, but her body was different now. It was compromised. It had been altered without her consent. There was a time, before Fliss died, when Sarah would have offered her brother a kidney without a second's thought. But that was then. It was all so obvious now she knew what to look for. John had never left the company. Phil had never been the company's most valuable asset, AR1. Of course it had been John. Of course he was the company's precious AR1. His illness, his weakness, the urgency, the reason he'd needed her to care, to trust him, to give him something vital. And Marie's supposed death had been part of it. A lie designed to manipulate her. A lie to make her see John as tragic, as worthy of sympathy, as yet another victim of the company. But she hadn't been fooled enough, or not soon enough, to offer him a kidney voluntarily. So in the end, they'd simply taken it. She closed her eyes. Phil had never been the risk. She'd been watching him like he might turn, the experimental asset, the company's phantom subject. She'd been keeping him at arm's length, afraid to get too close because of when he would betray them. And all the while, she'd been watching the wrong person. John had been the company's man in every possible way. She looked down at her body. At the dressing, the red edge of gauze, the gaudy shadow of bruising that had begun to spread beneath her skin. It was surreal. She didn't feel like a patient. She felt like something discarded after use. Except that there was one small comfort. The company had what it wanted now. It had its A01 asset, and it had the kidney it needed for him. Surely, any interest in the rest of the household, Phil, Nadine, Bruce, Lewis, Flannel, would have ended when the company retrieved not only its most valuable asset, but also the kidney to fix him with. She let out a slow breath. It hadn't been a slaughter. It had been an extraction. Surgical, logistical, biological. They'd taken what they needed, then dumped her, which meant, hopefully, they were all safe now. The thought cleared a space in her chest that had been choked with fear. She pictured Flannel pressed against the door, watching for her. Phil, pacing the basement, confused. Maybe angry, maybe mourning, maybe blaming himself. Nadine would be rereading dosage instructions, while Bruce huffed over improperly labeled packaging as they sorted their supplies out again. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Crying was pointless now. She needed fluids. She couldn't afford to lose more. She shifted again and managed to turn onto her knees. Another spike of pain ran through her, but she bore it. She was alone, with no idea where she was. Her body was down a kidney, and her strength was bleeding out into a dirty bandage. But she knew who she was, what had been done, and why. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was obvious that she couldn't stay here. She was going to find a way out, even if she had to crawl. Sarah clenched her teeth and reached for the wall. The concrete was rough beneath her palm. She used it to pull herself upright, inch by inch, pressing her forehead against it when the effort made her vision grey out. If she could get outside, maybe she could work out where she was, how far from home. She'd felt lightheaded since waking, and her knees buckled if she didn't keep them locked, so she'd just have to take things slowly. Sarah turned slowly, scanning the space. She could see a doorway and moved towards it. Agony lanced up her side, and she had to bite the inside of her mouth to stop herself screaming. And that was when she heard them. Voices. Low. Male. Not close, but not far. Either. Not company men, judging by the babble of them and the lack of barked orders. Instantly, she stopped moving, holding her breath. How many were there? Maybe 3. But then, laughter and more rumbling babble, more than 3. The clank of something metal. Was that the sound of wheels on gravel, like a cart? Scavengers. Nausea threatened to overcome her. If they found her here, cornered, injured, helpless, barely able to stand, they wouldn't leave her alone. They'd assume she was already half dead. They'd do what scavengers always did with stray bodies: strip, search, and take. If she was lucky, they'd just take what she had and leave her breathing. But that was unlikely. One of them started whistling something tuneless. Others joined in. Sarah moved. She lunged toward the door, bracing one hand against the wall, using her elbow and shoulder to help take the weight. The dressing tugged. Her side screamed. But she didn't stop. Another step, then another. The voices were closer now, inside the same building, down a hallway, maybe. She could hear the scrape of boots. Someone said, "Over here," and a laugh followed. She reached the door. It had no handle, just rusted holes where one had been. She pushed at it, and nothing happened. She cursed under her breath and shoved harder with her shoulder, sweat pouring off her, until something suddenly shifted. The door scraped open enough for her to squeeze through if she turned sideways. Her hip caught on the frame and jolted the wound again. She gasped but forced herself through. A dim corridor stretched out before her. Rubble, dirt, unidentifiable detritus covered the floor. Stains and graffiti obscured the walls. She could hear the scavengers more clearly now. Time was running out. She staggered forward. There was light ahead. Maybe it was a way out. She had to chance it. The urgent thing was to get away from them. Behind her, too close, she heard a voice say, "Thought I heard something." Another answered, "Probably rats." And another, "Let's check anyway." Panic climbed her throat, but she bit it back. She had to keep moving. Whatever was ahead, it was better than being found by them. She knew what came next if they caught her. And that was more than enough to keep her going. Piles of rock narrowed the corridor, forcing her to hug the wall. At least it helped keep her upright. Her legs trembled, barely holding her weight. Her side burned. Every few seconds she had to stop to steady herself. She had to slow her breathing, try to make it less noisy. The scavengers were close now. She could hear them moving. Voices low, boots crunching, something heavy dragging across the floor. "Just empty med stuff and wrappers in here," one said. "Check the other rooms." Sarah pressed on. She spotted a narrow door ahead, slightly ajar, just wide enough to offer hope. Beyond it, dim shapes, shelving units or cabinets. She slipped inside, heart hammering, and left the door as it was, afraid of making a noise if she tried to close it. It was darker in here. The air was stale, overladen with a chemical sting. Storage racks on both sides, mostly bare, covered all the wall space, leaving no room for another door out. There were no windows that she could see. There was no escape from this room. Desperately, she headed for a wall, thinking she could at least try to hide behind some shelves. But with the next step she took, the floor gave way beneath her. She dropped like a stone, landing hard on an uneven surface. Everything, everywhere, was pain. There was no time and no air to scream. She fought off the blackness, trying to take over her mind, and tried to listen. What was that? A pause. Then, lower level? Probably rats. Sounded heavier. Sarah didn't move. She couldn't. Everything hurt. Not just the wound now. Everything. She couldn't tell if she'd reopened the incision. Her vision pulsed. The world tilted around her. Footsteps creaked above. Another voice, more distant. Nothing in there. Floors collapsed. You sure? Look at it. And I don't want to fall down it either. Fine, let's check the boiler room. Their voices faded again, grumbling, casual. Sarah curled her fingers into the grit beneath her. She was still alive. The fall had nearly knocked her out, but it had also saved her. Below their line of sight, she hadn't been seen, and they'd moved on. She lay still, waiting for the ringing in her ears to fade. There was a horrible taste in her mouth, maybe from biting her tongue when she fell. Her right wrist throbbed. Her left hip screamed every time she breathed too deep. Her entire torso was a mass of pain. Eventually, the light above became even dimmer. The scavengers must have moved on by now. The world quieted. Still, she didn't move. She didn't want to move. There was too much pain, dizziness, nausea, too much cold and yet hot at the same time. She'd probably torn something, possibly reopened the wound. There was nothing she could do about it. Right now, the only thing that offered her any safety was the darkness. She welcomed it and slid gratefully into its embrace. Sarah drifted. Time ceased to exist. Pain came and went in waves, too distant to stop, too close to ignore. Her limbs felt weighted down, glued to the ground. Her thoughts were unfocused, shimmering at their edges. Someone said softly, "Don't try to move yet." She turned her head towards the voice. She knew she loved that voice, trusted it. Mike. He crouched beside her, elbows on his knees, watching her with that look he always wore when he was really listening. Except now, he looked clearer than he ever had in life. Not overflowing with high spirits, exactly, but not worn down either, as if something unbearable had been lifted from him. "Hi, Sarah," he said. "Still fighting, I see." "You're dead," she croaked. "I know." He smiled. "Weird, right? I didn't believe in this sort of thing either, but I can see things now. Things I couldn't before." Her mouth was so dry, her tongue felt like a lump of wood. But still she managed to ask, "What things?" Connections, blood, memory, influence. The whole messed up architecture of what they built around us. "You mean the company?" "I mean the people behind it, the government, and the people behind the government. The company is small fry in the grand scheme of things, although it's that screwing with us at the moment." "You had VF," he nodded. "They made sure I had VF. They must have been following me for a long time. They infected me. I couldn't come home and risk bringing it with me." "I found a map in your hand." "Yes, someone tried to help me by pointing me in the direction of antivirals, but it was too late, and at least I got to die in the dry." Sarah swallowed. "And John. John's a company man," Mike said. "Always has been." She blinked at him. "They cultivated him," he said. "Groomed him with access, authority, guilt. Then they gave him Marie. Or maybe they gave him to Marie. Either way, they built a leash and then handed her the end of it." Sarah closed her eyes. "He loved her," she whispered. Mike nodded. "Still does, even after what she's done. But that doesn't make him safe or innocent. They used him to get to you. You, Fliss, John, you all share it. Something in the blood, some marker or mutation that makes you respond differently to the virus. Is that why they wanted my kidney? No, they wanted your kidney because they were so excited at the discoveries they made in John's blood that they overdid it. Put him through too much strain. He needed a kidney to stay alive, and it had to be yours." Her body trembled with a long series of shivers. "Mike," she tried to speak. There was much she wanted to say to her old friend, but he raised a hand and stopped her. "You need to rest. I'm only here to buy you time." His hand touched her forehead. It felt warm. "Real. I can't fix your wound," he said, "but I can stop you from falling into a coma." "How?" "By keeping you occupied. And that's what I've done." She tried to smile, but her mouth wouldn't obey. "You're not alone," he said. The air shifted. The light around him dimmed. "Mike, don't go." "You're not alone," he said again. Then he was gone, or she'd lapsed into unconsciousness again. Sarah couldn't tell. Either way, the warmth Mike always brought with him was already fading. and she hadn't had the chance to ask him who it was who'd helped him. Sarah drifted. She couldn't tell if she was floating or falling. Her breath rattled in her chest, kicking at the ache in her side with every heave of her lungs. When the voice came, it was not gentle. "God, Sarah, you look like hell." She didn't open her eyes, just waited for it to pass. Another fever shadow, another memory crawling out of the dark. "You're not real," she whispered. "Oh, how I wish you were." She managed to turn her head a few degrees to look, anyway. A figure sat beside her, cross-legged, relaxed, as if this were just another afternoon. She looked like Fliss. She had sounded like Fliss. Of course, Fliss would come to her as well. All her dead loved ones were visiting. Was this what happened when you were about to die? "I watched them bury you, Fliss," she mumbled. The figure shrugged. No one opened the box. "No, they said you'd killed yourself in such way that it wouldn't be pretty." "Oh, good one. That would have stopped me opening the box as well." "How long have I got?" "For what?" "Before I die." "You're not going to die. I shall make sure of it." "Why are you here then?" "Well, admittedly, this isn't quite how I pictured our reunion." There was bitterness in her tone. The living Fliss had never been bitter. Being dead can't have suited her. "Because we should have been reunited after I was actually dead, not before, do you mean? We could have reunited on a fleecy cloud with harps playing in the background, instead of on the floor of a filthy, deserted building." "No, daft sod. Still given to flights of fancy, I see. I am actually alive." "Ha! Now who's indulging in flights of fancy? You died. You killed yourself. I read the note. I fought with John." "They wrote the note," Fliss said. "The company, not me." Sarah blinked, tears itching her cheeks. "You were gone," she whispered. "I was taken." "No. Yes." The word landed like a falling anvil. "You're not." Sarah's mouth, impossibly, was even drier. "You're not part of the fever, are you?" "No, Sarah, I'm not. I'm really here. It's me." Sarah tried to sit, but pain lanced through her, and she collapsed with a curse. Fliss was there in an instant, hands bracing her firmly. She didn't feel at all spectral. "This was a good fever dream." "Easy," Fliss said. "You move too fast. You'll tear something." Sarah decided to humor the ghost. "So, how are you alive?" "They couldn't understand how I had chronic VF for so long without dying, so they took me, and you had to go through that charade of a funeral. I woke up inside one of their sites. John thought I was dead too. They gave him proof. Gave you proof. That was the deal." "What deal?" "I cooperated. Let them test me, monitor me, use me, whatever it took. So long as they left you alone, that was my condition, that you stayed free. They already had two of us. I couldn't stand for them to have you too." Sarah stared at her. "You let them own you to protect me?" "They already owned me," Fliss said flatly. "I just turned it into a contract." Sarah looked away. "It worked," Fliss said, "for a while. And now? They broke the contract. They took your kidney. For John. I found the transfer record. Asset A03, partial harvest. That's you. Once I saw that, I left. No more loyalty. No more leverage." Sarah wobbled her head one way and then back the other way. "I thought if I ever saw you again, I'd scream. I'd slap you for killing yourself instead of coming to me. I don't even know what I feel now." "You don't have to know," Fliss said. "You just have to let me get you out of here." Sarah hiccuped a laugh. "I'd like to see a fever dream get me out of here." "I'm alive!" "Of course you are." Sarah lapsed into oblivion again. Next time she came round, she found herself on the move with her sister's surprisingly strong arm holding her up, urging her to struggle on. "Do you know where we're going?" Why she was asking the hallucination, she had no idea, but maybe it was like arguing with yourself to make up your mind about something. "I only know what I learned when I tracked them here when they dumped you. It took me a while to get close. There's been a lot of scav activity recently." "Where are we then? Where are we near?" "I didn't even know if you were alive," Fliss added. "You weren't moving. They just left you, as if they were dumping an old used-up machine. I suppose that's what they were doing." "In a way," Sarah tried to laugh, but it came out more like a cough. Fliss checked each way with every step, like she'd done it 1,000 times, but despite all her caution, her pace never slowed, and Sarah had no choice but to stumble along with her. The only thing that kept her moving was Fliss's grip, and the burn in her gut that said, "Don't stop." At the end of the tunnel, a corroded hatch stood open. Beyond it, darkness and wind. "We're nearly there," Fliss whispered. "We get out." We find shelter, a place to hole up. I've got contacts. Sarah couldn't answer. She could only focus on keeping her legs moving. They lurched through the hatch into the alley beyond, and the night air hit them, fresh, earthy, alive. Then they heard footsteps, too many to count, too fast, boots grating on cobbles, raised voices, curses, too close. Fliss yanked Sarah behind an industrial skip where they crouched, barely breathing. Through the gap beneath the skip, Sarah watched shadows spill into the alley. Unkempt figures in layers of rags, some with faces covered, waving aloft machetes, pipes, sticks, an old shotgun. Scavengers. "Spread out!" one shrieked. "They must be down here somewhere." But another voice echoed down the alley, this time from the other end. This voice was calmer, colder, imperious. "Company! Alert! Sweep the alley!" Company. They were trapped. Scavengers on one side, company goons on the other. Sarah found Fliss's hand. Her sister gripped it tightly.